Hi, everyone. Thank you for all the audience joining us this morning with Ase, having Cafecito with Ase. So before we get into our program for today, happy Hispanic Heritage Month. So part of those announcements for today, please join us October 8th for a free workshop on Latina Equal Pay Day. The registration links will be in the comments below shortly. Also, this is a 2-week warning to apply to the Mujeres de HACE Entrepreneur Program. Our application closes October 10th. Again, you could find the link for that program in the comments below. But as we are getting audiences joining us this morning, feel free to comment in the chat where you're joining from today. But it is my absolute pleasure to welcome today's guest, Hady Mendez, who is the author of Calladita No More. So welcome, Hady. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. And so before we jump into our conversation this morning, my first question that I would love for you to answer is, how do you like your cafecito, or what's your beverage of choice in the morning?
All right. Without making this too drawn out of an answer, I will tell you that I have a very bad habit. So I start off the morning with green tea. That's the first thing that touches my belly, touches my stomach, is green tea. And I have a very nice flavor. It's called tropical green tea, and it's delicious. So that's how I start it. But then in the middle of the morning, I have my mid-morning cafecito and con algo dulce. So like una donita, half a muffin, un scone, alguito, porque me da hambre. And then I have cold brew with that. And I make my cold brew at home. It's really good for those of you who haven't tried cold brew. It's café negro, but you brew it cold instead of hot. So I brew it overnight, like 24 hours. And I keep it in the fridge, and it's nice and cold. And I have that like winter, spring, summer, fall, and it's delicious. And I take it black, sin nada, sin ni azúcar, ni crema, ni leche, nada. And it's delicious.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, I'm more simple. I'll just do an iced coffee over the summer, or just some water in the morning. But no, thank you so much for sharing. And so let's, dive right into it. So can you tell me a little bit about your cultural and professional background?
Yes. So I am Puerto Rican, Boricua, technically and officially a New Yorker, and a very proud Bad Bunny fan for those. If we have any of those out there, I'm right there with you. I was in Puerto Rico this summer, and I saw him live in his residency, and it was an amazing experience. So really into the culture, and totally identify as Latina and a woman of color. Outside of that, like from a professional perspective, I spent over 25 years in corporate, mostly at the intersection of technology and financial services. I work for companies like Accenture, JP Morgan, BNY Mellon, Salesforce, so big companies. My last corporate role was head of equality at Slack. But that was actually one of the first times that I was in a role that was like employee facing, mostly employee facing. I actually spent the better part of my career in customer facing roles, in tech positions that were in customer facing roles. So I was always like, either customer success or like sales, business development, relationship management, like that type of thing. And I did that for over 25 years. Then I spent like 5 years in nonprofit. I worked at a school for 3 years as a community school director, which was amazing. I did that in the South Bronx. And I worked with school families, and it was really rewarding work. I felt really good about the work that I did there, because the community was very much like the community I grew up with, which was a Black and brown community. And then prior to that, just prior to working at the school, I actually was a missioner. So I volunteered for 2 years in South America. I already mentioned that I'm Puerto Rican, but I lived in Bolivia for 2 years. And I lived in Cochabamba, Bolivia, which is the third largest city there. And I was a volunteer working with incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. So that was really rewarding work.
That's amazing. And also what I heard in your story was kind of all these different pivots that you did without your career. I feel sometimes we feel like our journey or professional journey is linear. And then I think, just based on your story,
Yes.
it's not. It took all these, corporate to nonprofit to some
And now
volunteering work.
entrepreneurship.
Yes, exactly. Which I think gives us a great leadway to our next question. Your journey, part of, Mujeres de HACE Entrepreneur alumni to best-selling author and CEO, shows the power of transformation. So can you tell us a specific moment or lesson from that program that shifted how you saw your own potential?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say everybody should join this program if you are starting off as an entrepreneur, you're thinking about it, or you've actually even been doing it. Because I joined the program probably about a year after I started my business. And it's not too late to wait a year or two to join the program because you're still going to learn a lot. I think you said there's like 2 weeks left for people to sign up. I would say if you're thinking about it, do it. If you're not sure, you have questions, come to me, come to any other like alumni, because we could definitely share our experiences. But it was a very rewarding experience for a variety of reasons. The first is because I had joined another entrepreneurship program, and it was like un montón de gente, and it just didn't give the personalized touch, ese toquecito where you like get to know people and people are like you and we're all kind of have similar lived experiences. It's very different. So I would say when I was surrounded by Latinas and we were talking about our experiences, it was a completely different vibe. So for me, that alone made the experience different. But the other thing I would say is that when you're starting off, and I actually started my own business quite unexpectedly. So I became kind of an entrepreneur because I got laid off and I was like, well, I got to do something. I got to make money. I got to pay my bills. I got to eat. So I started my business. And when I, como like de repente, pretty much. And I would say that when you're starting off in that way, especially if you haven't planned for it, you're a little bit scrappy. You have to be scrappy because maybe you don't have a lot of money to invest in your business early on. You can't hire other people to help you. It's like you, and you're just trying to make some money. So that was me. That was me for my first year. I was like, I'm not spending any money. The only thing I'm doing is trying to make money. But I realized a través del tiempo that in order to get my business to the next level, I really needed to invest in myself and my business. And so the asset program for entrepreneurs was the first time I invested money in my business. Like that was like one of the first investments that I made. And I was like, bueno, let me see how it works out for me. The other program that I did for free did nothing for me. So let's see if I spend a little money, if I'm going to get more value. And I 1,000% did. And I would say that after that, I ended up hiring like a business strategy person. I hired a marketing intern. I got a PR coach. I got a media manager. I got a project manager. So after that, I saw what it was like to invest money and see how, okay, that kind of, if I have big dreams, if I have big goals, I'm going to have to invest a little bit to get there. And I'm going to need like experts to surround myself with, experts and like resources that can help me to get there. People that like know what they're doing and that specialize in the areas where maybe it's not my strength. And so that program, in addition to making me feel seen and celebrated, also and teaching me that it was worth it to invest in myself. I think the third thing it did was that it helped me to see that I didn't need to do it alone, like that I didn't have to do this alone, that the journey it's a long journey. If you're gonna have a business and you want it to be the thing that sustains you over time, you have to you're gonna have to get people to help you along the way. And yeah, and PS, all those people that I talked about that I hired, they were all Latinas. So that's the other thing that I was like, we do it all. So let's just keep celebrating and lifting each other up. And that's like very much on brand for me. Like I'm always like, how can I continue to lift us up even as I'm trying to build my business? And so I got to do both things at the same time.
And that's awesome. And, I think sometimes as Latinos, sometimes we're self-doubting ourselves that, am I worth this investment, right? And then you told us like, you're like, I need to invest myself in order to,
Yeah.
be to the next level. So I think that's amazing. So, moving on to the next question, as you mentioned earlier, throughout your career, from being a tech executive to entrepreneur, you broken barriers that many Latinos still face today. So what specific barriers have you broken throughout your journey, and how those experiences inform the work you do now, helping others break their own?
Yeah. So I already mentioned that I mostly worked in tech and financial services. And for anybody who's in either of those spaces, you already know that those spaces are very white male dominated. So I remember my very first job, a lot of times I was the only Latina in the room, like almost all the time, I was the only Latina in the room. And, that it can be a little bit jarring depending on like where you went to school. My school experience was also predominantly white, but they were definitely more Black and brown people than where I went to work. So I would say that, for me, it was like, why is this my experience? Like, why aren't there other people here? Where are my people? So I think that first and foremost, that's a very real experience and feeling to have, is to, feel a little bit alone, feel isolated, feel like, you know, when you're the only one, sometimes it's very hard to speak up. Sometimes you feel invisible. People and people make you feel invisible. It's not just you feeling invisible. It's because people sometimes do ignore you or dismiss you. And uh, when you have identities that are intersectional in nature, oftentimes that like magnifies the ability, or magnifies your sense of feeling excluded. So it's like, if you're a woman, you already feel excluded in those environments. But if you're a woman of color in those environments, it could get, really scary and ugly real quick. So I would say that, being in those spaces, I had to learn how to navigate it. And I would say, eso se toma tiempo, because, it's new. It was new to me. So it took me time to navigate those waters. But I would say eventually I started to kind of come into my own and realize like maybe my superpowers, and, things like I was able to understand the businesses that I worked in. Like, I was a consultant. I worked with home equities and mortgages. I worked in the brokerage business. I worked, like different businesses. I was doing APIs, like, so depending on whether it was like a financial product or a technical product, I had to learn all of that. And I feel like that's a barrier that I overcame, because I was like, I'm not here just to take up a space. Some people still to this day say, oh, affirmative action, that's why you're here. And it's like, no, I'm not here because of affirmative action. I'm here because I know the products, I know the services, I'm good with customers. I ended up becoming a certified mortgage banker. I ended up getting my Series 7 when I was in the brokerage business. Like, I got my titles and certifications because I wanted to be good at what I did, and I wanted to offer value to my customers. So, yeah, maybe it could be different reasons why we're invited, to be part of an organization. But what we do with those opportunities is definitely, eso depende de nosotros. So we really have to, put our best foot forward, to really be willing to learn, to understand, to be mentored and coached. I always volunteered and raised my hand to be part of any mentoring program, because I wanted people to notice me and to, be invested in my career and my development. So, I think the things that I overcame were a function of how willing I was to give of myself, build my skill set, lean into my superpowers, stay ready for the opportunities that would become available, and be open to coaching and mentoring from other people. And I feel like that's the same advice that I put in the book, because it's like, it takes all those things. It's not just one thing that's going to allow you to thrive. At work, it's going to be a lot of things, but most of all, it depends on you and your desire to really want to succeed. If you have that desire deep within you, I think then that allows you to take different courses of actions that are going to help you to achieve your goals.
Yeah, no, I really resonated with what you just mentioned. I think, as Latinos, I think we're, hardworking people, right? And we have our goals and, visions and missions. And then, but we're also thinking about the people that we bring with us, right? And giving back to our Latino community, and I see that now with your book that you're sharing, so people don't have to start from, ground zero, right? That they could look at for mentors, look at, best practices. So
Yep.
talking a little bit more about your book, in Calladita No More, you boldly weaved refranes, uses phrases like "she had me tripping," "real talk." This authenticity reflects us' approach, right, of helping people show up as themselves rather than, conforming to more traditional playbooks. So how do you help Latinas embrace their cultura as a strength in the professional settings?
Yeah, I love the topic of refranes, and I was talking about it behind stage. I forget the name of the person that was Chelsea. Yeah, Chelsea and I were talking about it behind stage. But Refranes, for those of you who don't know what they are, they're like sayings, or maybe some in your culture, they call it dichos. But I'm talking about things like, en boca cerrada no entra mosca, maybe el camarón que se duerme se lo lleva la corriente, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. So all of those, most of those appear in the book. I like, one of the ones that I love the most is from Guatemala to Guatapeor. And that's like a really fun one that I remember my mom saying. But anyway, these are sayings that we grow up with oftentimes. It's like something our mom, dad, tío, tía, abuela, abuelo would tell us. And I wanted to include them in this because I don't want to, like, even though we're talking about corporate, even though a lot of us are first gen and we're the first to, we don't have parents that worked in corporate. We don't have parents that could give us quote unquote career advice. We don't have parents that could tell us, like, here's how you navigate that situation. I would argue that the refranes are those things, are those pieces of wisdom that tell us how to navigate those situations. And that's what my book actually celebrates. It's like saying, listen, I know that maybe, and I acknowledge it. My mom, she didn't have a credit card. She didn't drive. There was a lot of, she never had a corporate job. There was a lot of things that she didn't have, but she gave me the refranes, and those refranes, I use them at work. And I talk about how I use those refranes at work, how they led me, how they guided me. So I feel like that's one thing that I want to offer anybody really in the community, is to just maybe notice where some of your wisdom comes from, where some of like how you operate, like how you're shaped. It comes from a lot of different places, but certainly one of those places is from our culture and our families. And I want to celebrate that. So that's definitely in the book. And then I think, the book is also it's a reminder to everybody, all readers, that, you are in charge of where your life goes. You're in life where you're in charge of where your career goes, where your life goes, what is a priority, where you spend your time, what is important to you, what you prioritize. All of that is, you determine that. And I remind people, like, do the things that make you happy, do the things that you're good at, do the things that bring you joy, that understand and recognize what are the values that drive you, know what your purpose is, and do more of that. So, you talked about like lifting up the next generation of underestimated leaders. That's definitely like one of a big purpose for me, is like, I want to provide guidance, and I want people to learn from my experiences. And so that's why I'm sharing the story. And I've been doing this for the last 2 years through my business. And I'm like, well, I want to make a bigger impact. How can I create more impact? And how can I reach more people? And I saw the book as an opportunity to do that.
No, that's awesome. So if you haven't gotten your book yet, is it now on the store, or where can some of our audience?
So it is absolutely everywhere. So you can get it online anywhere. You can get it at your local like indie bookstore. But I wanted to share that it's available in 4 formats. So paperback, hardcover, goes without saying. There's the ebook also, but there's also an audiobook. So I recorded it myself. So I'm the narrator. And I have to say, like, out of everything, that's what I'm most proud of. But obviously I could not have narrated the book if I didn't write it. So I am proud that I wrote it, but I am also really proud of being able to narrate it. I write it. I wrote I wrote the book like I talk. So I'm like Spanish, English, sometimes a curse word, real, very, very authentic. Like all the things that you're seeing right now, like what you see, that's what you get in the book. And when you hear it, I think, people have really been enjoying that. So that's on Audible. So y'all should definitely check it out, because I feel really proud of that. And somebody even told me, so here's maybe an interesting way of looking at like deciding which book to get. My friend had the paperback and had the audiobook, and she would read the audiobook. And then at the end of each chapter, I actually have reflection questions. So she was like, then I would put the Audible book on hold, and I would go and do the reflection questions. And then I would come back and listen again. So she kind of used a little bit of both to get like the ultimate experience from the book. But thanks for asking that question, because I really hope that people check it out.
No, yeah, I'm super interested in the podcast now. And again, that whole question was, how are you authentic, right? And how we share our stories is really important, right? And we showing as our true selves. So, for our next question, you know, as we said, it's Hispanic Heritage Month, where we celebrate not only our contributions, but our power and our potential, right? As somebody who has been a trailblazer and created your own pathways, what do you want the next generation of Latino professionals to understand about their ability to transform not just their own trajectory, but to create the ripple effects of possibilities for the entire community?
Casina. Okay, so let's see. Let's see. I think I want to start off by saying that we have to acknowledge that the systems that we operate in oftentimes were not designed with us in mind. And I think that's like a very, foundational thing to understand. Like corporate wasn't really designed with our experiences and how we are in mind. And so therefore, it feels like it's harder for us to navigate. It's harder for us to thrive. It's harder for us to succeed, get promoted, make money, get the jobs at the like big tier companies. I don't know, whatever the challenge you face, it's understandable because they never expected so many of us to like be like college educated and be ready to show up. And now like I think like 1 out of every 4 employees by the year, I don't know what, is going to be Latino. So it's like we're here and there's a lot of us coming through. And I think, we have a very young demographic. So it's just the future generation is just going to be very Hispanic in this country. So, obviously that scares some people and excites others. I'm one of the people that's really excited about that. So if we acknowledge that these spaces and places weren't really designed with us in mind, I think that's good to ground us because we're like, okay, it wasn't designed with us in mind, but how do we still succeed? So to me, it's like a puzzle. And it's like, okay, I understand that you didn't build this for me, but how and in what ways can I still thrive in this environment? And I feel like that's really where we need to spend the bulk of our time. Like, there's people that are going to try and fix the system, and they've been trying to do that for a long time. And it takes a long time to unravel, what's there at this moment. And we know that there's like, we take steps forward and steps back. So what I say is, focus on yourself as an individual and say, how can I show up differently? How can I take up space? How can I own my narrative? How can I, be ready for the opportunities that are going to be presented to me? How can I ask for help when I need help and support in order to get a promotion or to move to a different department or get hired by a different organization? How can I I would say be ready is the most important thing. How can I be ready? And I think that, I want to remind people from our community that we are enough because there's a lot of, stories and narratives that make us feel like we're not enough, that we're too much, too loud, too this, not enough that. It's like silence. You gotta like really silence those voices because they can be very distracting and they're not going to be helpful. So just know yourself, know what you're about, know what excites you, know what you're good at, know where your values are, know what your purpose is. And then really, I would say, then just, build and design a path for yourself and for the people that are coming behind you. And I think we've mentioned that more than once now. So I'm going to say it for like maybe the last time is that this is not just about opening doors for you. It's not just about creating opportunities for yourself. It's about being an inclusive leader. It's about opening doors for other people. It's about amplifying other voices. You don't have to be the head of anything to celebrate another person or to create space for another person or to give other people credit for their ideas. Like you're always a leader. You can always be a leader, even if you're not in a leadership role, but you always have the opportunity to lead by example. And I would say, take that opportunity to make sure you're creating space for other people. You're giving people their flowers. You're acknowledging them. You're celebrating them. Whether you're an ERG leader, whether you're just a member of a department, whether you're like a brand new employee that just started working at a company, you still have the opportunity to do that. So seize those moments and take advantage of them to demonstrate that you're the future. Like, and the future is inclusive, and so take every opportunity you have to create space for other people. That's something I don't think you'll ever regret.
No, and thank you. I think ending such on a, positive note there. So, Hady, I just want to like thank you so much for joining us this morning and taking time with, our, your network too, being an alumni from the program, and giving back not just to, ACE, but, to the whole Latino community here. So I was going to see if there's any questions in the chat, which I think we have time for maybe one question. So this is from Lisandra. So how did writing the book help you help your own narrative and not be afraid to share with others?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I love it. Thanks, Lisandra. I would say for me, I had been sharing my stories up to that point as someone who was a speaker, professional speaker, when I did workshops. Whenever I was invited to be part of a panel, I would always try to share my own stories because I feel like that makes it so much more relatable. And it's not just like pie in the sky, but it's like this thing happened and this is how I dealt with it. So I think like that's always been part of my brand. But I think like opening up with some of these stories, and I would say like a good chunk of them were not good stories. They were like awful things happened to me. Like I got overlooked for a promotion. I got like re-leveled and like demoted at one time. People in my company were ignoring me I had a manager who, brought me to a team and then, spent like a year ignoring me and like didn't really give me like important work to do. And so like there was just like a variety of things that happened to me. Not all of them were good. In fact, most of them were not, but I still learned from them. And I think you can learn from good experiences and bad experiences. But I feel like I realized as I was writing the book, like, wow, yeah, I did learn a lot from these experiences. And I also saw the connection between my experiences and these refranes. And I was like, oh man, like all along, I was doing this thing and I didn't even know I was doing this thing. Like it was powerful stuff. And anyway, I was happy at the end that I'm like, okay, now I have something that I can share with people that like kind of paints the full picture, which is I am very Latina. These refranes shaped me. My family shaped me. The culture shaped me. And I still learned how to navigate corporate. And I still, I live to tell the stories that happened to me and what I learned from them and what you can learn from them as the reader. So I think it was a really positive experience all the way around.
Thank you so much for sharing. And, I think that's something I'm going to take away from this conversation is refranes and how important they are not just to our culture, but also how we use this, right, for in our careers and remember where we come from, right? And so again, Hady, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And thank you to all of our guests who tuned in, across the US joining us and wishing everyone a great reminder of Hispanic Heritage Month. And remember to be proud about our Latino Heritage Month. And, thank you, everyone, and hope to see you at our next upcoming event. Bye, everyone.